In today's video, we're going to be going over the Fantasy Grounds Classic basic user interface. So we're going to discuss the various layout, the various elements that make up what nearly all Fantasy Grounds Classic rule sets are designed to display and show. So when you first start a campaign, the very first thing that will pop up is this campaign setup window. When this pops up, you can there's some handy useful links here. There may be different links and buttons and stuff that are available depending on the rule set that you are currently using. For the purposes of this video, I am using the CoreRPG rule set, which is what most of the rule sets are based on. So the things that I demonstrate here should be applicable just about everywhere in all other rule sets. So looking through this campaign setup, there's links to the manuals and some guides and stuff going on. Some of the rule sets will have some shortcuts to load a group of modules. For example, all of the core modules for 5th edition, the Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, and Dungeon Master's Guide could be loaded all with a single button click, as well as a few other options. There may be some token modules that you can load, some free tokens that come with Fantasy Grounds. If you have a large number of the Devon Knight token bundles, they are excellent, but they do take up, if you have a large number of them, they do take up a lot of memory. So be careful of clicking on the Devon Knight token bundle button, because you may end up loading far more than you expect, and if you do too much, you run the risk of possibly crashing Fantasy Grounds if it uses too much RAM. And last off, you have the ability to open up the options. Now, everything that we've clicked on we'll be able to get access to. We'll be able to go back and access all of those elements at any time. So once you're comfortable with what you've got here, you can uncheck this Show on Load button, and then it won't pop up every time you open your campaign. So let's take a look now at the interface here, the different elements. One of the most important elements that you're going to come across in this very first one here is the chat box. This is where Fantasy Grounds is going to output its information to you. So most of the time you're going to be spend watching here. This is where the results of dice rolls and other things like that will be output to. So you can read whatever is your campaign is producing, whether it's during combat or people chatting or whatever. Up here, when you have characters connected, you will see their characters' portraits displayed along the top here. As you can see here, I have a test character connected. Double-clicking it opens up the character sheet. The character sheet will look different depending on the rule set, as every rule set has its own customized character sheet. In the center of the interface here, we have a image or a picture, a symbol. This is the default SmiteWorks decal. This comes with in all of the rule sets, and this is the default decal that is displayed in Fantasy Grounds. This can be changed in the options. It can be either turned off or swapped to some other value. New decals generally are added through extensions. So you would go ahead and load an extension that had the additional decals in it in order to have the option to select additional decals. Here along the right hand side, we have a sidebar with a number of very important buttons. Up here at the top, we call these our campaign data buttons, and these control some core functionality of Fantasy Grounds for us. This is where a lot of the setup information will be put, and where options and things like that will be set up. And then down the right of this sidebar, we have the various data banners. Now this is going to be your campaign actual information. So images of maps from your campaign, rollable tables, story elements which contain the descriptions of everything, NPC records that have all of their stats and information, tokens associated, and so forth. So all of the data specific to your campaign is going to be located here in one of these different types of data. Down here at the bottom, we have a link to open up tokens. So we can see the various tokens that are available to us, and we can click on the modules to be able to load additional tokens. So if I wanted to load the animal pogs, I can load those up. And now if I drill into here, we can see the various tokens that are available that I can use. Now, I do want to point out that in Fantasy Grounds, a token is not the same thing as an NPC record. An NPC record has all of the additional stats, powers, capabilities. If your rule set has things like hit points, all of that stuff is defined in the NPC record. The NPC record will also have a token associated with it, and that'll be what picture is used when the NPC is placed onto the combat tracker and onto maps. The tokens themselves are just the images, and they do not contain any of the NPC stats or information. Next up, we have our library. Now the library, as we can see here, when you first open it, it has a variety of information up at the top. These correspond to the data types that will appear here. We sometimes call these the data banners because the default theme kind of looks like a banner hanging from a wall. You can turn these off individually by checking on the boxes or the little check boxes to the right of them. Or up along the top, there are 4 presets that you can use. The GM preset is the default that will appear when you log in as GM. Now for CoreRPG, it just shows everything. The play preset is a more limited preset, which has the things that are useful for players. So this is what will show by default when a player connects. The create PC set is a different preset. In rule sets like 5th edition, there will be additional buttons here like backgrounds, classes, etc. And so the create PC is useful for when you're in the process of creating your character. And then there's the all preset, which shows everything. And you can turn and use any of the presets, or you can turn them on and off individually as you like. Additionally, down here we have the modules, just like we saw with the tokens. When we click on modules, it allows us to load up any of the modules that we have available to us that we've purchased. All right, now down here in the bottom left, we have a couple of things here. First off is our dice. So our dice are, of course, going to be used in just about every role-playing game that we'll be playing. And so the dice are controlled by left-clicking to pick up the dice and then dropping them onto the chat. So by picking them up and dropping them on the chat, it will roll the output. If you pick them up and drop them anywhere else, it will not roll. There's one additional interface element that's not currently displayed. I have to enable a couple of options. So I'm first going to enable the show GM rolls and the table dice tower. And when I do that, it displays this additional element. This is a dice tower. Now what the dice tower does is it allows us to keep rolls hidden from the player. So as you can see here on the chat window, the first 2 rolls that I made have this eyeball symbol to the left of them. That means that the players cannot see the roll. Now I've turned on the option to show GM rolls, so if I roll anything else, it will not have the eyeball symbol and players will be able to see the results of those rolls. To keep the rolls hidden, I would then drag and drop them onto the dice tower, and now they remain hidden from the players. Down here in the bottom left, we have the modifier stack. This allows us to input a number. So I can take a number like 5 and put it here on my modifier stack, and then the next time I roll something, it will add in that modifier that I just added. There's another modifiers window that we'll talk about in just a second that makes it easy to add your own customized modifiers. Here along the bottom, we have the shortcut bar. This is extremely handy. They're numbered 1 through 12, and those numbers correspond to the function keys on your keyboard, F1 through F12. So by hitting F1, it'll trigger whatever is located in here in number 1. So there are a number of things that we can link to that will be useful. We can link to story entries, or just about any kind of entry, really. So let's create a simple story entry. We'll call it my test. And here on the entries, there's going to be a link symbol. Now for this rule set, it appears as kind of this reddish dragon, and I can link to that by dragging and dropping that symbol right down here onto my shortcut bar. And that could be a map, it could be an image, it could be an encounter, it could be just about anything. And then whenever I'm playing, I can access that just by clicking on that, and it will open up that value. Now it's also nice that you can click it again and it'll toggle it closed. So you can choose what to show very quickly. Now there's 12 default shortcuts, but there's actually quite a bit more available to you. There are 3 modifier keys, Shift, Control, and Alt, any of which can be pressed in order to add additional keys. So if we hold down Shift, you can see that the numbers now go to S1 through S12. If we hold down Control, it does C1 through 12, and Alt 1 through 12. Now we can combine those as well. Control and Shift, we can do Control and Alt, we can do Control Alt Shift. Altogether we have something like 96 toolbars or shortcuts available to us. Additionally, in addition to linking entries, we can also link to things like chat commands. So here in the chat, we have a series of commands that are available to us. Now, I'm not going to go into all of them, but you can type /help to see the list of commands that are available. So one of them is the die command, which allows me to roll any numbered die that I would like. So for example, I could type /die 2d6. Now if I hit enter, it's going to roll 2d6 and output the value. So I'm going to repeat that by hitting the up arrow, and that puts the previously typed thing back into the chat. But instead, this time I want to add it to a shortcut. So while it's typed, before I hit enter, I can drag that to a shortcut. Now at any time, I can click on it or use the F2 button, and it will roll that dice value for me. And this can be used for character attacks, any number of different things. And the DM has access, of course, to all of the different chat commands that are available. So let's take a look at some of the individual entries up here, which are very important. First off is the combat tracker. The combat tracker is used in every rule set pretty much where there is combat. And the combat tracker is used to keep track of combat. So you'll drag your characters, you'll drag your NPCs onto the combat tracker first. Encounter records can be automatically output directly to the combat tracker, and then you'll proceed through combat here on the combat tracker. When adding creatures and players to maps, it's always important to add them to the combat tracker first and then add them to maps. So for example, add them here first and then add them onto a map. Next up is the party sheet. The party sheet is where we manage our characters. Now, the CoreRPG rule set only has the inventory and order tabs, but some of the other rule sets will have a few additional tabs, things like experience points or overview tabs of the party members and what their capabilities are. Here on the party sheet, on the inventory tab, this is where we give treasure to our parties, coins, items, and either allow them to sell them or allow them to distribute have the DM distribute the coins and money and items to the various players that are assigned to them. The DM does have the option to use a calendar. So with the calendar, you first have to load a module with the calendar's definition. So you can click here on the modules and just do a search for calendar. Fantasy Grounds does come with a default set of calendars defined here in this SmiteWorks calendars module. So you can load that module, and once that's loaded here on the calendar window, now you'll have a choice of the various calendars that you can select from. So there's the Gregorian calendar, which is what we use, but for various fantasy settings, there's a variety of calendars available. The Forgotten Realms calendar, Dark Sun, Eberron, any of these others as well. So for the sake of this, we'll go ahead and select, say, Pathfinder. And once we select the calendar, then we have the ability to use the calendar for our game tracking. We can input a year. This is the year 1045. Hit enter, and it will recycle the year for us with all of the appropriate days. Era is just a text field. You can add or subtract to it as you would like. And you can set the current date by clicking on that button, and time. Each of these date entries is a log entry, and the log entry can contain two fields. So by double clicking on it, you can have information that's visible only to the GM. So I can put GM only information. And when I close that entry, it will go ahead and put a little dot on that, that date entry. I can also have things that are visible to players, player visible entry, and when I close that, it will be visible to players. So the players will only see the ones that are visible to them, and the DM will see. You can notice that the color has changed. So entries that are player visible will appear at the red dot. Entries that have GM only information will be a blue dot. Now you also notice that some of these are underlined. By mousing over the underlined, it allows the holidays that have been defined in the calendar to show up. So you can click on any given one or mouse over it to see which holiday is being celebrated on that particular day. If you want to set a particular day, you can select the day and hit set the date, and then that will tell you what the date is. If you want to output the date, you can just click on there and it'll output the date to the chat, or you can output the time as well, either way. If you want to look through the log entries, you can just click on all logs, and that'll show you the different entries that we created here, the 22nd and the 24th. So that's the calendar. Next up is one that most should be familiar with. This is where we set our dice color. So this is the artist palette, and you select your dice color just by clicking on these various buttons to either darken or lighten your dice. You can also toggle the color of the lettering, whichever is going to be most comfortable for you to read. Next up, we have the mood lighting button. There are 4 main moods that are available here. The default is the daytime mood. And basically, this mood button puts a transparent colored overlay over everything. So if I select the nighttime mood, it kind of goes darker blue overlay to it. You can do the red for a kind of a campfire feel, or you can do the green for a more foresty feel. There are some rule sets or themes where by changing the color of things, some of the text can be difficult to read. So be aware of that when you change some of the coloring. If you want more control, there is a chat command that gives you a little bit more control over the colors that are going to be used. Next up, we have our options. So this is where we'll set up all of our campaign options, and we'll go over these in another video. But you can choose all of the options that are going to be in play for your campaign. Next up, we have our modifiers. Now, I spoke previously about the modifier stack. This is a way that we can predefine some modifiers. So we can create a modifier by clicking the green plus, giving it a name and a value. We'll say this is my attack bonus, and it's going to be a 4. And I want it to be visible to everybody. So now I've created this modifier. Let's create another one. This will be my stealth bonus, and it's going to be a -3 for whatever reason. So now that I've got these modifiers, I can quickly add them to the stack by just clicking on the button, and it's been added to the stack. Now you notice when I added it to the stack, there's this little pip down here at the bottom, and there's 5 more empty ones. So I can select a second bonus, and now it will sum up the total so far, as well as fill in the next pip. So when I make a roll, both bonuses will be applied, the attack bonus and the stealth bonus, and giving me a grand total for the roll, for whatever the rule set requires for your particular roll. So you can add any specific bonuses that you want here in the modifier section. You can also shortcut these just by dragging and dropping them. So at any time you can quickly add bonuses and then apply them. And in this case, I'm going to have all of them added. And then last up on the interface is the effects window. If you are using effects, a lot of the rule sets have a variety of different effects coded in. Effects are used to force modifications to various dice rolls, like adding bonuses to your attack roll, or adding bonuses to your stealth checks, or whatever it is. You can customize and create your own effects here, same way we did with the modifiers. You will just type out the effect, whether it's visible, its duration, the information about the effect. AC4, for example, might be something that the 5th edition rule set would allow to increase your armor class by 4. And then when we're ready to apply it, we can just drag this button onto that character's entry in the combat tracker. If the character's entry has initiative, then we can automatically apply it. So for example, here in the combat tracker, I have my character, duplicated that one. We can apply this effect just by dragging and dropping it onto there, and now that effect has been applied. If you set it to duration 0, then it will be set to never expire. So if I delete that one and then I re-add it now, it will just never expire, and it'll always have that effect available to me. So you can create your own custom effects here. Now, what effects are available to you does depend on the rule set that you are using. For our next video, we're going to be going over the various campaign options, and we'll begin looking at the 5th edition rule set, which will be used for the remainder of the videos in this series, just for demonstration purposes. Thank you.